Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Everybody, today I just got a segment I recorded while I was driving. There's some road noise in the background. I apologize for that. I think if you just adjust your volume during that segment, it'll probably be okay. But here we go. Hey everybody, this will be a driving ramble. I've got kind of a long drive in front of me here, kind of midday at work. So turn on the hands free, and it's a very familiar route. So I think I feel safe enough to talk a little bit about my recent game. Just a recap of not a lot happened. This is the latest game with my son and his friends. So D&D with theater kids, D&D with an asterisk, meaning old school essentials / Knave, plus BJ's homebrew mishmash. But so I think I mentioned before, I'm going to move on to keep on the Borderlands and kind of reuse some of the ideas I did when I did my initial OSE campaign a few years ago. Only about half the kids showed up. I think probably going into as school starts, we're going to have maybe 6 or 7 regular kids and then another 3 or 4 that kind of rotate in when they're available. So, but this was kind of the group that are probably the most consistent players. So I decided to have them. We're going to have them. We need to wrap up the last adventure and then move on to the next to the keep. We need a little bit of transition. So we talked about how they would divide up the treasure from the dragon they got, and we went back to the city, and they got to level up. We'll have to level up their friends' characters next time. So there wasn't really a whole lot going on other than why would they want to go to the keep? Well, what I established is they're this large city of Valis Sparta, and they've become sort of there's a noble house there that has employed them for various tasks, and so they're informed by the Lord Boris, who has been their kind of sponsor from early on during the Veiled Society campaign the Veiled Society module, that the Duke's niece has been appointed as Castellan to this keep, this old fort near this large tradeway, and some various of the other noble houses and merchant guilds were invested in this keep to protect the tradeway, but they're having trouble. They're really being plagued by bandits, and there would be probably it's not really so much of an assignment as just say here's an opportunity for you guys as up and coming adventurers. You've been hailed as heroes in the city, as you undid the Veiled Society, and then you've recently slain a dragon. So this might be a good opportunity for some of you to go and make a little name for yourself, a little fortune and glory for you. So they're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. So really what we did from there was we just, I said, you know what, and I just sort of pulled a number out, 3-day journey. It's a 3-day journey to the keep. And we rolled random encounters, 4 times a day, morning, noon, evening, and overnight as they camped. And just use the random encounter tables from the OSE core rulebook. And dang it, if they didn't roll any bandits, it's like surely they're going to get waylaid by bandits. I even weighted the rolls a little bit, and they didn't encounter any bandits. But they did. Of course, they avoided a few times they were encountered. Mostly it was sort of the fantastic megafauna. They kept rolling animals and insects. I thought I'd rolled a dragon at one point, but I misread the table and caught myself. That would have been funny. But a lot of the times the things weren't hostile, and the players chose not to provoke non-hostile. They a troop of rock baboons and a giant lizard. And some other various things, but they did have a few encounters. One morning, breaking camp, I rolled a oil beetle, that was hostile, but when I rolled for the number appearing, it was only one. So I said, well, this thing is probably hungry. It's wandered into your camp, and it attacks the first person it sees. So they had a little fight with that. Probably the funniest encounter was the most fun encounter for me was I rolled a giant spider, and they're going along in a wagon. They've got a wagon, And so I said, what's the cutest woodland creature any of you guys can think of? And they kind of debated about it. And then finally, a young deer. So you come across a young deer gnawing on some weeds that have grown up in the middle of the road. At this point, they were in kind of a forested area. And they're like, yeah. And I said, and suddenly a giant spider just drops. And I spread my hand out like, if you're going to mimic a spider, and slammed it down on the table right in front of the miniatures. And sinks its fang into the deer, and they're like, ah! A couple of them even jumped. And I'd rolled that there were two spiders. And so, the spider was after the deer. It was sort of they were both surprised. The spider surprised by the players there. The players surprised by the spider doing this. So we roll initiative, and the first player's like, well, I'm going to shoot the spider before anybody moves up on it. And she goes to draw her bow, and I said, how when you draw a bow, you kind of sometimes will point upward as you're kind of, and then lower the bow to level it if you're going to shoot straight. She's like, yeah. I'm like, well, when you kind of point the bow up to begin to pull the string, you notice there's a second spider above it in the tree. So they had a really good two melee fighters. They're kind of more heavily armored, kind of rush forward and engage the spiders, and one of them got hit but managed to make their saving throw and not get poisoned. It was a lot of fun. Again, using the mighty deeds. I think one of the fighters is like, I'm going to use my halberd to stab the one in the tree and then try to knock it off. And, he succeeded on that. And then another one, used their mighty deeds to stab the other spider and try to turn it over on its back so that it, was not as much of a threat. It had to spend its turn the next time flipping over. So they're learning to use some tactics finally, which was really good. The two wizards, the guy whose thief had died last time, he decided to play a magician now. So they were more entertaining themselves by doing silly things with cantrips throughout the game, because they felt like the fighters seemed to have the spiders and the beetles and stuff at hand. So and then we get to the actual keep, and I just had them explore it a little bit. They learned that it's backed up. The inn is full. There's people who've pitched tents around the hill at the base of the keep because they're trying to travel, and they're waiting. And the reason that the Castellan's troops cannot fully deal with the bandits is because the forest has also been overrun by goblins. And I gave them a clue for that when you roll random treasure for giant spiders in OSE. It just says, I think the result is it's just going to have whatever its victims might have had. So I said, okay, well, let's just roll I can't remember which table I used. I know what it is. I decided we'll give them a hint about the goblins. We'll say these spiders have webbed some goblins up in the trees. And so I rolled just for what a random encounter with goblins would be. And there's 7 dead goblins that are kind of desiccated and stuck up in the webs in these trees. So they're able to kind of get some coins and some extra arrows off the goblin corpses. And then I said, everybody, I had them kind of do an intelligence check, and a couple of them rolled really high. I said, you're thinking there's really no reason for goblins to be here. This is unusual. So they when they get to the castle, they learn that's part of the problem with dealing with the bandits, is they know the bandits hide in the forest, but there's also goblins in the forest. They don't know if the bandits and the goblins are allied or working together. They just know that nobody wants to go into the forest because it's overrun with goblins and hobgoblins and the like. They do visit the inn and learn that it's almost been taken over by a group of dwarves. If you guys have been with me since the early days of the podcast, this story may sound familiar because I'm recycling it. And these dwarves are the inhabitants of what will, in the Caves of Chaos, be the Kobold Lair. And the story is that these bugbears came in and attacked and ran them out, but had kobolds with them. And so they offer to pay the adventurers to go investigate and see what's going on at the mine, see if they can figure out, so they can strategize how to get their mine back. And so that's part of the the story there for them. And then they just explored down in the kind of the tent city around the base, and then meet a couple of NPCs. They meet there's a gnome down there who's a blacksmith. They can take to have their armor repaired or things like that. It can probably appraise items. There's a little tavern down there. It's the only permanent structure the family is set up where people can get food and drink and hear rumors and gossip, because there's no room for anybody to stay up in the actual keep where travelers would normally stay, right? So, and that's where we left off. So they did get their first, and they asked about the goblins. They talked with the guards, but they really zeroed in on these dwarves. They didn't mean for it to happen, but they just so happened to do, which is good, because typically when you run keep on the Borderlands, you kind of hope they encounter the kobolds first, because that's the lowest level dungeon and the least risky, and you want them to kind of work up from the kobolds and the goblins up to more and more successive enemies. But the way I'm going to work it, some of them are third level at this point, so they're ready for the tougher challenges that are out there. So we'll just let them stumble across them however randomly they do, and make it a true kind of sandbox for that. Which I think is how you typically run keep on the Borderlands. And then if they stumble into one of the more difficult layers first, that they either die or they run away and come back later when they've when they feel a little stronger and more prepared, right? So, but we'll see how it goes. I'm really enjoying it. These kids definitely get into the role playing with NPCs and wanting to know the motivations and why things are happening the way they are. They're not just kick in the door, kill the monster, take the treasure. They want to see the story part of it play out as well. So that's a lot of fun. Something I did do that was a little different. I've mentioned before, I really like spell cards, and those are working really well using the OSE or the old school spell cards. You can get them off Drive Through RPG, and because the way I'm working it is even the clerics have to have a spell book, and they collect scrolls and tablets. Of course, tablets are a one-day use to cast a spell. A scroll is a single use. But if they save enough money and take some downtime, they can certainly copy scrolls off their tablets to have spare extra uses of those spells. Or if they want to invest a lot of money and time, if they get some downtime, they can actually create a new tablet off the scroll. But they haven't really accumulated that much wealth yet, because we've also been doing gold for training. So I may have to... I'm seeing how that works. In the long run, I may want to have to titrate, either maybe phase out the gold for training or titrate up the amount of money they're getting, so that the wizards and clerics can expand their repertoire of spells, because it's costing them money to do that. Or maybe roll that into training. An outgrowth of training is, because part of training to be as a spellcaster is studying spells and rituals and things like that. And maybe that's a solution, is to say, well, as the natural outgrowth is you produce, X number of tablets or scrolls or whatever. So I'll have to think on that. But the really thing that worked really well, and I don't know if I actually needed it as much because I had a smaller group, but when a lot of them show up, they get excited, they get distracted. It's really hard to get through a round of combat and keep everybody focused, and to particularly stick with the procedural aspects of old school essentials. And so what I did is I created with some index cards, what I'm calling it's not really an initiative deck, it's more of a combat deck. And it goes, the one side is the cards numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On the other side is the order of operations you go through in BX style procedural round of combat. So the first one is declare actions. The next one is roll initiative. The third one is, the winners go through their sequence, and then the losing side goes through its sequence. And then finally, I always end with rolling morale for if it's indicated for monsters and hirelings and things like that. And so what I had to do is have the players actually, whoever rolled initiative for that turn, because they take turn rolling initiatives going around the table each round for their side. They also flip us through the deck and guide us through the steps. And so that, I hope, is going to get them more focused on the procedures. It's a visual reminder, even if I were to do it, it's a visual reminder. It's there in the middle of the table of what we're supposed to be doing right now and what's coming up next. So hopefully that'll just reinforce everybody focusing, because there's another thing to focus on and there's a way to get them engaged. That's kind of how I had them engaged even during the travel was, all right, you roll roll a d6 for a random encounter. Okay, you got an encounter. You roll a d12 to tell me what type of creature you encounter. Okay, you roll me a d8 to tell me what specific creature we're going to encounter. Okay, you roll me a d6 to tell me if it's surprise. You roll 2d6 to tell me what its reaction is. And so we would get all those rolls, and then I could say, okay, here's what happens. I mean, I wouldn't tell them the results step by step, but once I had all the rolls, I could say, okay, well, you're surprised to see this giant spider drop out of the tree, and here's kind of the way the scenario goes. What are you going to do? And then we can go into the roll initiative and go through that sequence. So that worked really well. I'll keep playing with it and making sure we want to play test that thoroughly. But yeah, it's a little prop that I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever come up with that idea. I mean, I've seen initiative cards used as initiatives, but it's more like everybody draws a card and their place in the initiative is in the card. I don't know if I've seen anything that kind of takes you step by step through the procedures. But certainly I'm not the first person to ever thought about that. If you guys know of somebody else that's done that or have seen that in a product, let me know, because I'd just be curious to see how similar things have been implemented if they have. Anyway, that's about it. Not a real lengthy. Well, I guess that's 15 minutes. That's a good length for an episode. So I got a little bit left on my drive, but I don't have anything else to say right now. Okay, and that'll do it. So hey, give me a message. Let me know what you think. All the ways to contact me are described here in the outro music and linked in the show description. So I'd love to hear from you guys out there. And until then, wherever you're out there, take care of yourself. Make somebody happy today. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.